Oh, there you are. Used to be able to do this. Entertainment. Why? Entertainment? Uh-oh, I smell another ironic title coming on. Is a film from 2014, just started getting some distribution this year. What year are we in? 2015? And it's directed by Rick Alverson and starring Gregg Turkington. You may remember I reviewed a movie called The Comedy a few years back, which was also directed by Mr. Alverson, and Gregg Turkington had a minor part in that film. That film was starring Tim Heidecker of Tim and Eric fame. Tim Heidecker, Gregg Turkington, and Rick Alverson, all three of them wrote this film, although a lot of the dialogue was actually improvised. So this guy, Gregg Turkington's been making weird anti-comedy and weird music for about 20 years. I think my favorite of his projects at the moment is Faxed Head. But he's had this character, Neil Hamburger, for about 20 years, which is basically just this very sad, washed-up, hacky comedian, and the character's kind of transformed into this, you know, started out as almost like an alter ego thing just to make sort of prank calls, and it's developed into this very like sad, bitter old man character. The type of comedy that you know, Turkington, the character of Neil Hamburger, and indeed the director Rick Alverson, it's all connected with this sort of like uncomfortability and provoking the audience sort of thing. And so basically the movie, or the plot of the movie, is just exploring Neil Hamburger's, you know, would-be offstage persona, which is very drab and boring, and he just kind of, you know, spends his time going on tours or, you know, just glumly looking at the television in his hotel room, or kind of like wandering around the desert on his own. While this is all going on, Turkington's character is also intermittently leaving his daughter messages in the hopes of rekindling his relationship with her, but we never actually hear her. I've heard, or read rather, in interviews that there was footage shot and the character of the daughter actually originally appeared in the film, but they decided, you know, in the editing process to take it out. And like, honestly, one of the big things about this movie is just the feeling of absence and the feeling of loneliness, and I think they probably made the right decision. So although Turkington, I don't think, has done a lot of acting outside of this, he turns in a pretty solid performance, and we get some of the other usual bit players that turn up in Tim and Eric related projects like John C. Reilly and Michael Cera. And to be perfectly honest, they kind of don't really add anything to the movie, and their inclusion is somewhat superfluous. I liked this a lot better than the comedy. I think it was much more on point in terms of tone and the direction it wanted to go in, and it didn't fall into the usual annoying conventions. And this is one of those movies where I almost feel like they do a good job of just telling a story by showing as little as possible, and then you just have to kind of piece everything together on your own. I think the added element of having this daughter character who we never see and who Turkington's character desperately tries to contact throughout the movie sort of adds this level of pathos, or just, I don't know. It adds a little bit more humanity into the movie, maybe, makes it a little bit more interesting. And although, you know, the Neil Hamburger act kind of parallels the film as a whole, where it's, you know, it's supposed to be challenging and uncompromising and making you feel uncomfortable and all that, but at the same time it really has a sort of, you know, story arc to it, and it has ebbs and flows, and it has moments where it's more intense and slower moving moments, and also as a whole the movie kind of gets slightly more and more intense as it goes along, and you kind of have this feeling of like, oh yeah, what's gonna happen? Something bad's coming. I was actually surprised at myself by how invested I was in this character and actually wanting to see what would end up happening to him at the end. And I don't think it's giving anything away, but just in case, spoiler alert, the last shot is basically his character looking back into the TV at an appearance on a Mexican sitcom that he appeared in, and he's just sort of laughing maniacally at it while also sort of crying. And I think that's really a good encapsulation of the character as a whole. And really, to me, that last shot was basically a way of saying his character is accepting his fate and, what he's chosen with his life. And it's almost like this is his moment of realization. At the very least, the film is just really nice to look at. I think from the first shot, from when I began to the end, it was just really beautiful looking and some really nice landscapes. Both the soundtrack for the comedy and this movie were released on a label called Jaguar, which has a lot of really cool hip acts on it. I remember even going to Pitchfork Fest there. They had their little table set up, Jaguar, and they were giving me all this free shit, free CDs, and the guy was really nice, and yeah, Jaguar. The soundtrack for the comedy was pretty fucking badass. I mean, we had, Here We Go Magic, Gardens and Villa, William Basinski, for God's sakes. And now, this time around, it's a lot more kind of obscure 60s and 70s stuff. The music never really gets in the way. It's, very fitting. And then all of the interstitial, background music composed specifically for the film, I believe was made by a member of the 90s post-rock band La Bradford. And that reoccurring music kind of sets the tone throughout the movie and kind of gives this... it's hard to describe, man. It's just one of those, feelings. But, it keeps cropping up and really adds something to the atmosphere of the movie. Would you shut up? Honestly, guys, I have very little negative to say about this movie. I think it was great. Alverson and Turkington, definitely have this affinity for old 70s artsy movies and a certain type of storytelling. And, this movie also kind of feels like it's an answer to the fact that film concepts and the types of films have just been so marginalized just even in the last few years. And this is one of those movies that it's in your face, and it's something, man. They took all of the most vulnerable moments, strung them together, and then that's enough to actually make a completely coherent story. It's just an interesting character study as we slowly watch a man go insane. Why? Check it out. You might not like it, but, I was surprised by how much I liked it, and I really recommend it. Check it out, guys. Come on. Stay susceptible.